Welcome back, everyone. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss an update. And if you'd like extra content and special features, consider supporting me on Patreon as well. The wooden basket had several white painted bands circling the rim, while the sides were decorated with alternating stripes of pale orange. With its wire handles and sturdy wooden slats, it looked very much like an old fruit basket, the kind once used for apples or peaches. Even when filled with the usual office trash like crumpled papers, it wasn't terribly heavy. One person could carry it without much trouble. Charles, Terry, take this trash basket to the incinerator, empty it, and bring it straight back. I have another job for both of you afterward, Miss Nathany instructed firmly. Yes, Miss Nathany, my friend Alex answered quickly for the two of us. Neither of us was thrilled about the assignment, but arguing wasn't an option. Outside, the sky was dotted with scattered clouds, and the afternoon warmth hung in the air. Several of the other boys were already heading toward the boathouse to go swimming. Meanwhile, Alex and I had been chosen to deal with Miss Nathany's garbage. By the time we finished the errand and returned, the swimming time would almost certainly be over. Alex understood that just as well as I did. Unfortunately, Miss Nathany clearly didn't care much about our recreational plans. Alex was about a year older than me and a lot taller. Compared to him and most of the other boys I knew, I felt small. My head barely reached his shoulders. That afternoon, he strode ahead along the dirt road at a quick pace, eager to get the job done and return. Hurry up, Terry, he called over his shoulder when he noticed me lagging behind. Don't you want to go swimming? You're walking too fast, I replied irritably. A moment later, annoyed by my slower pace, Alex grabbed the basket and tugged it forward. The sudden pull ripped the handle from my grip, sending loose papers and scraps spilling across the ground. You idiot, Alex snapped, clearly frustrated. We both crouched down and began gathering the scattered trash. Neither of us spoke much after that. He was irritated by how slowly I walked, and I resented how bossy he was being. Mostly, though, we were both annoyed about missing the swim. The incinerator stood some distance away from the main office, down an old dirt road behind the girls' dormitory. It had been there for years and was well known around the school. Normally, being sent to dispose of trash wasn't such a bad task. It meant a little time away from everyone else. But today felt different. When we arrived, it looked like someone had used the incinerator recently. The small metal door was still warm. Alex handed me a long stick. Use this to open it. With some effort, I lifted the metal lever. The door creaked loudly as it opened, the sound echoing in the quiet area. Open it all the way, Alex said impatiently. All right, I muttered. When the door swung fully open, a wave of hot air rolled out. I stepped aside as Alex lifted the basket and dumped everything inside, including the papers. Why did you do that? I blurted out. He stared at me, confused. Miss Nathany wants the basket back, I explained. Realizing his mistake, Alex quickly reached inside with a stick, pulling the empty basket back out and placing it beside the incinerator. Come on, Terry, he said nervously. Help me. We hurried around picking up the papers scattered on the ground. The breeze had blown some toward a nearby creek, which made the task take longer than expected. Eventually, we gathered most of them and tossed them into the incinerator again before shutting the metal door. On the way back, I carried the now empty basket. Both of us walked faster than before, hoping we might still catch a few minutes of swimming. The road was quiet as we walked. I struggled to keep up with Alex's longer strides until he eventually slowed down. When I finally caught up, I noticed a small, mischievous smile on his face. Maybe he was relieved I'd remembered the basket before it burned. Without saying anything, he reached over and playfully ruffled my hair. Unlike most of the boys who wore their hair cut short, I kept mine longer, mostly because my mother liked it that way. Some of the guys teased me about it, calling me mop top, or joking that I looked like someone's sister. I usually ignored them. About halfway back, Alex took the basket from me. I'll carry it, he said, brushing dirt off the sides. Hey, Alex, look, I said suddenly, pointing toward a nearby set of swings. He glanced over. Yeah, I see them. They're for the girls, dummy, he added. Ignoring him, I walked toward them anyway. There were 6 swings in total, each with a worn wooden seat hanging from thick ropes tied to a tall metal frame nearly 10 feet high. Behind them stood several long wooden teeter-totters. "Come on, Terry," Alex called. "Don't you want to go swimming?" "Just a minute," I shouted back, already sitting down on the nearest swing and pushing myself forward. Seeing he couldn't stop me, Alex shrugged and sat on the swing farthest away, setting the basket on the ground nearby. Soon we were both swinging higher and higher. Alex was better at it than I was, quickly soaring above me. Eventually, I stopped trying to compete and simply enjoyed the feeling of the wind rushing through my hair as I swung back and forth. I didn't hear her footsteps. I didn't even realize someone was there until a sharp voice rang out behind us. "And what exactly do you two think you're doing?" Both of us jerked in surprise, trying to slow our swings and jump off. Standing behind us was Miss Johnson, the dean of the girls' dormitory. She was tall and stern, with a commanding presence that made most students nervous. Though many of us boys had heard stories about her strict discipline, few of us had ever actually met her. "I asked you a question," she said loudly. "Who gave you permission to use the girls' swings?" The seriousness of the situation sank in immediately. Our school kept boys and girls strictly separated outside of classes, and playground areas were clearly assigned. We were definitely somewhere we weren't supposed to be. "Come with me," she ordered. For a moment, I felt an overwhelming urge to run. Running away briefly crossed my mind, probably Alex's too, but there was nowhere we could go. Miss Johnson had already grabbed each of us by the arm. Her grip was strong and unyielding as she marched us forward. As we passed the basket, she glanced down at it. "Isn't that Miss Nathanese?" she asked sharply. Without breaking her stride, she ordered Alex, who was closest, to pick it up. Alex obeyed immediately. Miss Johnson moved quickly, her long strides easy for Alex to match. I, however, struggled to keep up. A few times I stumbled on the uneven ground, but she never loosened her hold on my arm. Instead, she practically dragged me along as we approached the girls' dormitory building where her office was located. When we reached the entrance, she released Alex just long enough for him to open the door. I didn't receive the same courtesy. She kept her firm grip on my arm and pulled me inside right behind her. Neither Alex nor I had ever stepped inside the girls' building before. Though it looked newer than the boys' dormitory, the familiar scent of cleaning supplies hung in the air, making it strangely similar. "Wait here," Miss Johnson instructed as we stopped outside a glass-walled office just inside the entrance. "Good afternoon, Miss Johnson," several girls called out politely as she stepped inside. Alex and I stood awkwardly in the hallway, saying nothing. We both knew we were in serious trouble and could only wait nervously for whatever punishment was coming. Miss Johnson didn't remain inside for long. She soon reappeared and snapped, "Follow me." She pointed down a dim corridor to the left. "Last door on the right." Alex bent down to retrieve the basket, but before he could lift it, she barked, "Leave it. You can get it later." We began walking down the corridor, Miss Johnson directly behind us. As we passed the office again, I caught a glimpse of a girl peeking through the doorway, watching us with obvious curiosity. "Eyes forward," Miss Johnson ordered. I immediately looked straight ahead. The hallway felt darker and quieter the farther we went. Neither Alex nor I dared speak. Even Miss Johnson remained silent until we reached the final door. "Inside." "Quickly," she commanded, her voice now carrying the sharp tone of a drill instructor. Alex opened the door and stepped in, with me right behind him. Miss Johnson followed closely, flipping on the lights before closing the door firmly. The room appeared to be her private office. A large wooden desk occupied one side of the room, while a long sofa rested against the opposite wall. Near the couch stood another door, leading to an adjoining space. "Undress," she said abruptly. Alex and I froze. "Remove your shirts and pants," she repeated coldly. For a moment I wondered if I had misunderstood. Surely she wasn't serious. "You heard me," she snapped impatiently. Her anger was obvious now, and it was clear she expected immediate obedience. Alex and I exchanged stunned glances before slowly doing as we were told. Miss Johnson watched silently while we complied. Once she seemed satisfied, She walked over to the second door near the couch and stepped into the adjoining room. A moment later, she returned, holding a long wooden hairbrush. Just then, there was a soft knock at the office door. "Come in," Miss Johnson called. Alex and I stood in the middle of the room in our underwear, awkwardly folding our clothes in our hands. The door opened, and two girls entered. They appeared to be about our age, perhaps even as tall as Alex. When they saw us standing there in such a state, both wore amused smiles. Without saying a word, they walked over to stand beside Miss Johnson. She crossed her arms and remained silent for a moment before gesturing toward us. Apparently, the girls understood exactly what she wanted. One of them approached me holding what looked at first like a pale blue shirt. She told me to raise my arms. Before I could question anything, she shook the garment open and slipped it over my arms. It happened so quickly, I barely had time to react. Only when the fabric settled around me did I realize what it actually was. It wasn't a shirt. It was a dress. The girl pulled it down over my shoulders and quickly fastened the buttons behind my neck. The garment was a light blue summer dress with short puff sleeves and delicate lace trim along the bodice. The skirt ended somewhere between my hips and knees, clearly designed for a youthful, feminine appearance. While she finished dressing me, Miss Johnson and the other girl turned their attention to Alex. He looked absolutely mortified as they pulled a yellow and white gingham dress over his head, similar to the ones older girls at school wore during the summer months. When the girl behind him finished fastening the buttons and tying a bow at the back, Alex looked at me with eyes that were clearly filling with tears. "Such charming young ladies you both make," Miss Johnson remarked sarcastically. The girl stepped back and motioned for us to turn toward her. Alex quietly began crying, though Miss Johnson either didn't notice or simply ignored it. "Now then," she began calmly, "what instructions did Miss Nathany give you when she sent you to dispose of that basket of rubbish?" Neither of us answered. Fear kept us completely silent. "She told you to return promptly, didn't she?" Miss Johnson continued, fixing her gaze on me. "But you didn't do that." Her attention shifted to Alex, as she smiled strangely. "And considering that every girl in this building is supposed to be upstairs attending sewing or art lessons, not playing on the swings where I found the two of you, I believe a lesson is necessary." She pointed directly at me. "You, come here." My stomach tightened with dread. Embarrassed, frightened, and ashamed, I slowly walked toward her desk. Miss Johnson cleared a few papers aside before looking up at me again. Then she nodded toward the couch across the room. "I believe it's time you were placed over my knees." At that moment, humiliation washed over me completely. Being forced to wear a dress was already unbearable, but realizing what she intended to do next made it far worse. Miss Johnson settled herself on the thickly padded armrest at one end of the couch. The moment she sat down, I knew exactly what was about to happen. Everyone in the room understood it as well. I was about to be punished. As I approached her, she pulled me across her lap with a firm motion, positioning me face down over her knees. For a moment, I lay there helplessly while she adjusted my position. Then I felt her lift the back of my dress, pulling the hem upward until it was bunched high across my back. My heart pounded with humiliation. I couldn't see what she was doing behind me, but when I felt her tugging at my underpants, the embarrassment became unbearable. She didn't lower them slightly, she pulled them down completely until they rested around my knees. "The swings where I found you are meant for the girls," Miss Johnson said sharply. "And since you chose to skip your class today, you'll now learn how disobedient girls are dealt with here." One hand pressed firmly against my back to hold me in place. Then I heard the sharp swish of the brush. The first strike landed hard. The shock of it made me gasp. A burning sting spread instantly across my skin. I kicked and squirmed, but Miss Johnson held me firmly in place. Her strength made struggling useless. The second blow came even harder than the first. I cried out, promising I wouldn't misbehave again, hoping she might stop. But she showed no sign of relenting. "When I'm finished," she said coldly, "it will be a very long time before either you or your friend thinks about skipping class again." The third strike was worse than the second. The fourth felt even harsher. After that, the blows came one after another. I quickly lost track of how many times the wooden brush struck. By the time she finally stopped, Tears were streaming down my face. My backside burned intensely, yet at the same time felt strangely numb. Miss Johnson lifted me upright at last. Through blurry, tear-filled eyes, I looked down and saw my underpants still bunched around my knees beneath the short hem of the dress. She allowed me to pull them back into place, something I did as quickly as possible. After that, my memory becomes hazy. I remember hearing Alex being called forward next. Like me, he was placed across her lap, near the desk. Before long, he was crying openly. From what I could see, his punishment seemed even more severe than mine, and by the time Miss Johnson finished, his face was streaked with tears and his backside was bright red. As Alex pulled his underpants back up, Miss Johnson adjusted her skirt calmly and turned to one of the girls. "Give that girl a tissue, so she can wipe her eyes and blow her nose," she said. The taller girl handed Alex a tissue. He slowly tried to compose himself while Miss Johnson dismissed them. "That will be all. You may leave." As the two girls walked toward the door, they glanced back at us with broad, amused smiles before disappearing into the hallway. "Now," Miss Johnson said, turning back toward us, "do you both understand what happens here when students skip their classes?" Neither Alex nor I could bring ourselves to answer. We simply stood there, too embarrassed to speak. "In a few moments you'll be taken upstairs so you can resume your lessons," she continued. Still unable to respond, we watched silently as she returned to her desk, straightened a few papers, and picked up the telephone. She made a brief call, most likely to Miss Nathany. "Yes, I'll keep them here until close to supper time," she said before hanging up. "Then I'll bring them back." It wasn't even noon yet. Miss Johnson led us out of her office and back down the corridor the way we had come. When we reached the glass office near the entrance, she told us to wait while she stepped inside briefly. A moment later, she emerged again, followed by one of the girls who had been there earlier. The girl hurried away down the hall. "This way, girls," Miss Johnson said, placing her hands on our shoulders and pushing us gently forward. Near the front of the building, we turned and climbed a staircase. Throughout the walk, none of us spoke. Alex and I were too ashamed, and Miss Johnson remained silent behind us. On the second floor, we could already hear activity coming from down the hall, the sound of voices and the steady humming of sewing machines. "There," Miss Johnson said, pointing toward a large room with an open doorway. Inside, nearly 24 girls sat in pairs at desks, each equipped with a sewing machine. The room was full of movement and chatter as they worked on their projects. Many of them wore dresses similar to ours, light summer colors such as yellow, green, and blue. At the front of the room stood the instructor. She wore a crisp white blouse with a dark blue skirt, and her reddish hair was pulled tightly into a neat bun. "I have another student for you, Miss Swissy," Miss Johnson announced, gesturing toward Alex. A few girls turned around immediately, noticing him standing there in the yellow gingham dress. Soft giggles began spreading through the room as more girls looked back. "That's enough, girls," Miss Swissy said firmly, clapping her hands to regain order. "Back to your sewing." Though several girls covered their mouths, trying not to laugh, they slowly returned their attention to their machines. Miss Swissy spoke quietly with Miss Johnson for a moment. Then she took Alex gently by the arm and guided him toward a desk near the center of the room where a girl sat alone with a sewing machine. "Sit here," she instructed him. Watching him walk across the room like that, I felt a wave of sympathy for him. He looked completely humiliated. "You come with me," Miss Johnson said, touching my shoulder. She led me back out into the hallway, holding my hand as if I were a small child. Directly across from the sewing room was another classroom. The doors were closed, but the noise coming from inside suggested it was just as busy. When Miss Johnson opened the door and guided me inside, I found myself standing at the back of another room of similar size. But this was not a sewing class. It was an art class filled with younger girls. Several long tables filled the room, and students were busy drawing and painting while talking excitedly among themselves. At the front of the class, the teacher leaned over two girls seated at one of the tables, helping them with their work. The art instructor had been standing in the center of the room, leaning over a pair of girls who were working together at one of the tables. When Miss Johnson and I entered, she noticed us almost immediately. At a small gesture from Miss Johnson, she left the girls she had been helping and walked over to greet us. Her name, I later learned, was Miss Mindy. She was nearly as tall as Miss Johnson, though clearly younger. She wore clothes similar in style, a blouse and skirt, but her appearance was softer. Her short brown hair was cut in a way that reminded me a little of my own, giving her a slightly tomboyish look. Despite the strict dress code everyone seemed to follow in the building, her warm smile made her seem friendly and approachable. "And who do we have here?" she asked curiously, looking at me. "Tracy," Miss Johnson said, addressing her. "I'd like this young lady to stay in your class for the remainder of the day. Would that be acceptable?" Miss Mindy paused, clearly puzzled. For a moment she studied my face, likely trying to understand the situation. My short haircut may have confused her at first, but then her expression shifted as realization dawned. I could tell she noticed the tear marks still visible on my cheeks. "Oh, I see," she said gently. She extended both hands toward me, which I shyly accepted. "Well, of course," she said with a cheerful smile. "We're always happy to welcome another young artist." "Excellent," Miss Johnson replied. "Then I'll leave her in your care. There's another student, an older one, in Miss Swissy's sewing class. When your class finishes, please bring this one there so she can wait with the other until I return." Miss Mindy nodded. "Of course." With that settled, Miss Johnson turned and left the room, closing the door behind her. Miss Mindy looked back at me kindly. "Well, sweetheart," she said softly. "What's your name?" "Terry," I replied, still embarrassed and fighting the urge to cry again. "Terry," she repeated thoughtfully. "That's a lovely name." After a short pause she asked, "What happened, Terry?" "We were playing on the girls' swings," I admitted quietly. "I see," she said sympathetically. She released one of my hands but kept the other. "I imagine you won't be doing that again," she added gently. I shook my head. "Do you like drawing or painting?" she asked as she guided me toward a long table in the center of the room. "Yes," I said honestly. Art had always been something I loved. Her smile widened slightly, as if she had sensed the sincerity in my answer. At the end of the table, two girls were sitting together, watching our approach with curiosity. "Emily Sophia," Miss Mindy said. "This is Terry. She'll be joining us today. Why don't you show her what you're working on?" Emily nodded right away. She seemed a little older than Sophia and acted almost like an older sister. Like several of the other girls in the room, she wore a dress similar to the one Alex had been made to wear earlier. Sophia, on the other hand, was smaller, barely reaching my shoulders. Her brown hair was tied into two pigtails with pink ribbons, and she wore a faded pink dress that looked much like mine. Looking around the room, I noticed there were about 30 girls in total. Most were wearing dresses of similar style, light blue, pale yellow, soft green, or tan. The designs were simple and somewhat childish. It seemed the colors helped the teachers tell the younger girls from the older ones at a glance. Under Emily's guidance, the afternoon passed surprisingly quickly. The girls spent most of the time drawing pictures and cutting shapes from colored paper for small art projects. We showed our work proudly to Miss Mindy whenever we finished something. Later we switched to watercolor painting. When that happened, Emily insisted I put on a large smock to protect my dress from any splashes of paint, something all the girls did as well. To my surprise, I actually began enjoying myself. After the shock of the earlier punishment and the embarrassment of wearing the dress, the art class turned out to be fun. Miss Mindy was kind and encouraging, and the girls treated me like one of their own. Before I knew it, the 5 o'clock bell rang. Like many of the others, I felt a little disappointed that the class had ended. After we cleaned up the tables and removed the painting smocks, the older girls, led by Emily, guided the younger ones downstairs toward the playground. I wasn't eager to go there myself. Miss Mindy asked me to wait by her desk while she finished organizing a few things. When she finally came over, she bent down slightly, so we were closer to eye level. Taking my hands gently in hers, she asked, "Terry, I watched you during class today. It seemed like you were enjoying yourself. Did you have fun?" "Yes," I said. She smiled warmly. "I'm glad to hear that. Your drawings were lovely." She straightened the slightly crooked hem of my dress before standing upright again. "If you ever want to come back to my class, you'd be very welcome." As she took my hand to lead me toward the door, I hesitated. Miss Mindy. Yes, darling. If I came back, would I have to wear a dress again? She smiled reassuringly. Only if you wanted to, she said softly. Only if you wished to. Her gentle voice stayed in my memory long after that day. She escorted me back across the hallway to Miss Swissy's sewing room. Inside, I immediately spotted Alex standing alone near the back, looking miserable. Hey, Alex, I said, walking over to him. What are you so happy about? He muttered bitterly. For a moment, I nearly started telling him how enjoyable the afternoon had actually been, but then I remembered where we were and stopped myself. Miss Mindy waved goodbye as she left the room. I returned the wave, secretly wishing I could follow her back to the art class. Across the room, Miss Swissy watched the exchange, sharing a brief glance with Miss Mindy before turning back to us with a faint smile. You two wait outside in the hallway, she said. Miss Johnson will come for you shortly. Not long after, Miss Johnson arrived. All right, she said. Let's go see Miss Nathany. She's waiting. As we walked back toward the boys' dormitory, we encountered several older boys. One of them spotted Alex immediately. Hey, Alex. Looking cute today, he shouted in a high-pitched voice, making the others laugh. So, what did you do all afternoon? Another boy joked. Sew dresses or play with dolls? More laughter followed. And look, there's two of them, someone added. Two little sissies. Miss Johnson stopped and turned toward them. This, she said firmly, gesturing toward us, is exactly what will happen to anyone caught playing on the girls' side again. The boys quickly fell silent, though we could still hear snickering as they passed. Eventually we reached Miss Nathany's office. Miss Johnson handed her a small brown paper bag. These are the students I mentioned, she said. Miss Nathany studied us carefully. Didn't I tell you both to return promptly? She asked. Neither of us answered. I did, didn't I? Yes, Miss Nathany, we said together. Then this, she said calmly, is the result of not following instructions. After a brief silence, she told us to wait in the hallway while she spoke privately with Miss Johnson. We waited there for what felt like forever, probably half an hour or more. Several boys passed by during that time, staring and whispering. Finally, just before dinner, Miss Nathany returned and called us back into her office. She handed us our normal clothes and told us to change. I was relieved to put my shorts back on, but strangely, part of me felt a little reluctant to take off the dress. Alex changed quickly. I struggled with the buttons on mine until Miss Nathany helped me remove it. She folded both dresses neatly and placed them back into the brown paper bag. Then she gave the bag to me. Take these back to the girls' dormitory, she said. On the way there, I stopped several times when no one was around. Each time I opened the bag and looked at the dress I had worn most of the day, folded neatly on top of Alex's. I even considered hiding it somewhere instead of returning it. At the time, I couldn't fully explain why. I knew I wasn't a girl. But over the years, I sometimes wondered if Miss Nathany or Miss Mindy ever needed help again in the art class, and if wearing a dress was part of the arrangement. I secretly hoped they might choose me.